Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, the SPA, is for Seek Power Always, that power within you to do your deeper work in the world. I am so delighted to introduce our next guest, which is Joie Cheng, who with her master's in social work is the queen of transformational book publishing. She's passionate about helping people write and publish their books so they can make the income and the impact they desire and deserve. Joie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Diane. I'm honored to be here.
This is going to be such a fun conversation because you have so many different layers that people maybe don't know about. You are a Patrick Snow certified publishing coach. You're an international best-selling author, a TEDx and professional keynote speaker, mentor, healer, circuit facilitator, and yoga teacher. What area inspires you the most?
Well, being a publishing coach is my passion because I believe that we all have a story. And it was through sharing my own story that really, was able to help so many people and it transformed my life and my business. And so that's the area that I definitely am most passionate about.
Okay. And I know that you share your story in your book called The Naked Truth, a woman's journey to self-love, about your personal journey of healing yourself naturally from deep depression and suicidal thoughts through self-love. And I think this is such a perfect conversation and perfect timing to have this conversation with what's happening out in the greater world. Suicides are at all high, depression, people not being as connected as they have been before, that people have to really make a conscious choice to continue those connections. So I'd love for you to share your story, how you moved through that, and what is potentially triggering you now with everything that's happening and how you're helping people move through that.
Sure. So when I was in my 20s, I went through years of depression and suicidal thoughts. I remember, walking across this bridge on my way to work and thinking, I wonder what would happen if I jumped off this bridge. So it was a really difficult time in my life, but it was also very confusing because at the time there was kind of nothing wrong in my life, nothing bad. Everything was good. I had a family and friends that cared about me. I had a boyfriend. I had a good job, so things seemed like they were good, but for some reason I was feeling this way. And so and then I did end up in an abusive relationship. And at that point, it was actually the greatest gift in my life because I didn't realize before that I didn't really love myself. And so it was really, that relationship really, highlighted that for me. And so I started thinking, well, I must not love myself because if I did, I wouldn't be in this relationship and I wouldn't have stayed in the relationship, as long as I did. So, and when I was in that relationship, I actually got introduced to a type of energy healing that I do with my clients sometimes called matrix energetics. And so I went to this seminar with him. And when I was at the seminar, I just started realizing that there were certain beliefs that I had that were really limiting my own happiness. So for example, I had a belief that, if I got married, I'd be happier. And I also had a belief that if I was single, I'd be miserable. And I started to think about these beliefs and started to question them. And I would ask myself, well, how do I know that getting married is going to make me happier? I mean, we have a 50% divorce rate in this country, so there's probably, quite a few people that are married that are not happy. And, how do I know that being single is going to make me miserable? What if being single was the best thing that ever happened to me? And so, really by just flipping those questions and not necessarily even knowing the answer to it, I feel like it really created space for me to really have the courage to finally end that relationship because I had kind of tried to end it before, but, never really stuck. And so, just doing that, I made the decision. I said, okay, I need to get out of this relationship and then I need to learn how to love myself. And I really didn't know how I was going to do that, but I just, knew that it was something that I needed to do. And I realized that I had had a pattern of going from one long-term relationship to another and really not being fully happy in it, but not wanting to end it because I had this fear of being alone, which goes back to my childhood and this fear of abandonment that happened with my dad, which you don't need to go into unless you want to. But, so it just, once I realized that, I was like, okay, I just need to start learning to love myself and then, only get into another relationship. Not because there's something I'm afraid of being alone or because I have something missing in my life, but just to have someone that I want to get to know better, and so I made that decision to, end that relationship and start learning to love myself. And then the universe started bringing those opportunities into my life to help me, learn to love myself. So I really think that, it does take making a decision. We don't necessarily need to know the how, but, by just making a decision that can really change your life when you really just make a decision, say, this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So connect the dots for us a little bit as far as, this realization, right, about, and I do love, and completely believe that experiences that we're in that may feel that they aren't the best experience for us can be some of our best lessons and the things that we can really grow from. So I really do believe things happen for us. It's how we actually look at them that we can actually evolve from them. From this place of self-love and self-realization and these questions that you were asking yourself, how did that bridge the gap to be able to see the impact of how that changed your suicidal thoughts and your thoughts of depression?
Yeah, so so some of the things that I did, like I found a Facebook group called 100 Days to Self-Love. And so that maybe 100 Days of Self-Love. And so that group, and in that group, what I would do is I would post something every day that I loved about myself in that group. And then sometimes, and I would write it in my journal, and sometimes I would share it on my personal Facebook page as well. And that was really powerful for a couple of different reasons. One being that, just I think that for us as women, especially, we tend to be really hard on ourselves, right? And so we tend to really focus on, what is not good about ourselves, and, and what we could do better, rather than like, what do we actually love? The goal is to get to a point, like eventually you want to get to a point where you can love the quote unquote bad parts about yourself that you don't necessarily want people to know. But you start with what you already do. So you can start with something easy, like I love my hair, I love my eyes, or, whatever it is. And knowing that there are definitely things you already love about yourself now. And at the time, 100 things felt like I didn't think I could do that. Like I was like, I don't think there are 100 things to love about myself. And so it felt like a really big stretch to me. But I was willing to give it a shot. And so I did. And I ended up doing it for over like 365 days. And I don't remember how many days, but I realized that there are an infinite number of things to love about myself, as I believe it's the same for all of us,
Right.
And also doing it in a group was really helpful because, for one thing, like having other people post their things, it might remind you of things that you forgot that you loved about yourself. But there's also something about group synergy, right? Where 1 + 1 = 3, not 2. And so there is really something powerful about people coming together for a common purpose.
Yes, absolutely. So this realization and these things that you could find the positivity in yourself became the building blocks that were, allow you to really see yourself as, the brilliance and the package that you are in the totality. And one of the things I love about, just bringing to light about women not always, not only sharing about themselves, but things that they may hide about themselves. And that, remind me of, when I was on the police department, yes, I worked patrol, but I also worked undercover. And working undercover, there was aspects that I obviously didn't share in that position, but there were also parts of my life that I didn't necessarily want to share either. And so I believe there's kind of three different aspects of our life. There's that public life, the part that we show people, we easily share it. Then the private, which maybe with our closest friends and people that we do things with. But then there's always that undercover life. There's that part that we hope people don't find out about us, or we think that we're going to be judged on those things, or there's things that are going to happen that, that I don't know, the world's going to crumble. And I think that's where you can either do the things that elevate you and shine light on that, or you can also kind of have the slippery slope where you go down and you're hiding those things. And then you kind of get into that. I think that's where the depression things can expand, just because of the environments that we create and the people. And I think it's so important that you talked about the community that we create and the people that are around us, because it's so important that, we can have 100 great days, and that one day can maybe feel like it can take us out. And who is it that we're going to turn to really support us in doing that? So you talk about having like self-love, and so what are some of the habits that you do to increase that self-love so that you have more positive days and more expansion days versus contracting?
Yeah. So, another thing that I did during this time that I still do is like a gratitude practice, right? So there's a Facebook group called What Am I Grateful For Today? And so the same thing, I would post something every day that I was grateful for in that group. I would write it in my journal, and I would share it on my personal page as well. And that's also powerful because it really retrains our mind, because our minds tend to be really focusing on what's lacking in our lives, especially when you're in a depressive state, right? And so so it really retrained me to start thinking about, the positive, like what do I have to be grateful for, knowing that there's always something. It could be as simple as having, roof over your head, or clothes, or, shelter, right? Like the really basic, having food, like the very basic things that, a lot of people don't even have. And so being able to realize that, there are so many things to be grateful for, every day.
Yeah, definitely. And this idea around community, I mean, this is one of the reasons I love having my podcast, is that I think that we expand the community. The more we share, the more we have positive platforms, the more, people can recognize themselves in the transition of people's stories. I think it's such an important thing. And you also have your podcast, The Naked Truth. How has that helped you in your healing? And maybe share some of the stories that have come out of that.
Sure. Yeah. So my podcast is called The Naked Truth Movement, and it's called the movement a movement because it really is beyond a podcast to me. It really is creating a movement of people that are willing to share our stories and to be vulnerable when we share them, and to recognize that when we do share our stories, from a vulnerable place, when we're not afraid to, just say, like, speak our truth, that we feel less alone, right? Like, all of us feel less alone in the world. And so it's been great to interview people from all walks of life, and to realize that no matter what people have gone through, like, we all have gone through challenges, right? So I had a guy interviewed who's made and lost millions over and over again, and to hear, the challenges that he went through, as well as the current challenges. And so, I ask people, certain questions, and then there's also a conversation too. So I don't always know what I'm going to ask, because it's really kind of in the moment too. But yeah, I asked them about, like, their greatest challenge and their greatest current challenge. And but one of the great questions is, what's your naked truth? And that's kind of my, signature question that, is actually a space that I create for, hopefully, healing for the guests as well as the audience. So, I hold space for the possibility that, my guests may share something they've never shared before. And, to know that they have that space to share, because there's something really healing when we're able to share things, that we've never shared before. And then also, hopefully, the listeners, when they hear that, they'll be like thinking, wow, I have never told anybody that as well. And I, might be afraid to tell somebody, but to know that I'm not the only person, that's had that thought, I think is really, like, makes people feel less alone.
Yes. And, you really embrace the concept of when women heal, it heals the world. Can you kind of expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, women, the feminine energy is super powerful. And especially, like, that's, we hold a lot of energy, right? Especially if you have a family, you're holding a lot of energy if you have kids, right? And your spouse, and just, if women are asked to do so much these days, like back in the day, like, women had to take care of the kids, and that's a huge responsibility in and of itself, obviously. But having to do that now, and have a career, and do all these things, like, and especially now with what's going on in the world, and women having to homeschool their kids on top of, like, I just can't even, I don't have kids right now, so I can't even imagine, like, the stress that, has been put on women, especially, like, just extra, stuff to do. And so I think that, and also women, back in the day used to come together in community a lot more. Like, we are women, especially, I mean, men too, but, like, women especially need community. We're not designed to, like, be on our own, to, just, like, we're designed to be in community. That's when we thrive. And so, having been a circle facilitator and being parts of women's circles, having that blessing and that honor, like, what I realized was that being in those circles, the most powerful part of those circles is being able to just share whatever's on your mind, knowing that you're not going to get any advice, you're not going to get any feedback, like, or anything. Like, a lot of times, you might share a story with a friend, and they're like, oh yeah, me too, and then they start going about their thing, right? And versus, like, having the chance to really, like, have people just listen to you, without judgment, without advice. And, we do this thing called beaming, where you kind of put your hands up, and it's really just this, where you get to receive in this moment of, like, them saying, I see you, I love you, I honor you for your truth, whatever that is. Even if I may not agree with it, it doesn't matter in that moment. It's all about you just receiving. And I think that's really powerful, especially for us as women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's more important than ever just to be able to cultivate who is your community, who's going to be there for you, and, to lift you up when you're in those, kind of challenging times. And, I really like to look at I think it's how you look at something is how you're going to act from that place. And, a lot of times we talk about like the fears, the different fears that, women have, and you can have kind of like this, like circular fear, right? Where you can start with one fear, and then if it kind of spins and it kind of almost like attracts all these other fears, and it can kind of spiral up. And so there's a way that you can kind of move through those fears and really step into being more fierce. And really that's that reclaiming of your power and really empowering that. I'd love to have you talk a little bit about how you acknowledge fear and how you move through that.
Sure. Yeah. I think, like you said, the first step is really the acknowledgement of it, right? I think that a lot of us want to push our fears away, right? We want to be like, oh, I know, like, just don't even want to think about it, or, and versus like, and that just keeps it there, right? And it's like what you resist persists, right? And so, so first recognizing that you have a fear, right, of the thing. So saying, okay, I acknowledge, just like really talking to your fear and saying, okay, acknowledge that I have this fear. And then thanking it for being there, because there's a purpose for it, right? We have fears for a reason. And, our fear is there to keep us safe, so that if there is something that we have to be concerned about, then we're aware of it. And so we don't want to just not acknowledge that it's there. And because when we acknowledge it, then the fear goes away, like there's less power there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I believe that fear saved my life on many nights where, something, triggered, especially in being in alleys by yourself at like 2 a.m, and then having some fear that pops up, it brings your awareness, right? Then your intuition starts to kick in, then you can really start trusting yourself and you start leaning in to situations. And I think that the more you listen to those type of things, they can actually help you be more grounded in where you are and make better and clearer decisions to really help. And I just absolutely believe that our life experience really does guide us in where we need to go. And so one of the things that I also like to talk about with my guests is, what are some of the disempowering things that have happened in your life that you were able to turn around and have them, you either learned from them or they became empowering, positive moments?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, that abusive relationship was a huge thing for me. Thankfully, for me, when I was in that situation, I think a lot of times people tend to internalize and think that they did something wrong, right? And that's very common. But for me, I somehow knew that it wasn't about me, like, because I just realized, I was like, whatever he said to me, like, it didn't warrant, like, what I did or said did not warrant the response I got. Like, it just didn't make sense. So I was like, I know that this is not about me. And actually, while we were together, he found out that he was abused as a kid by his mom. Like, his mom threw him against a wall as a baby. And so obviously that has an effect on you, even if you weren't aware of it. And he also had experiences with women in the past, that I think were also influencing. And like, we all bring stuff into relationships, right, from the past. But yeah, so I'm grateful that I had that awareness, because I think a lot of people may not have that, and it's so easy to think like, wow, there must be something wrong with me, that I did something to cause them to act this way towards me, versus recognizing that they've got their stuff, and that they're probably projecting that onto you and whatever. And people that have been abused are more likely to abuse other people, and all these things, right? And so just recognizing that that it's not about you.
Right, right. And what I'm hearing also is just having perspective, right? And so sometimes when, we can really look at as the observer of like, okay, what's happening over here with them, it's not necessarily a reflection of me. And I really do believe that keeps you grounded in who you are, and to just accept what's happening in front of you and be able to move through it from a more powerful perspective. Because, we interact with our environments, whether it's our people or our space. And, that's another thing I love to kind of talk about too, is that, we have different experiences in our bedroom versus our kitchen versus our living room or office. So what is the favorite room that you have in your home, and why?
That's an interesting question. Well, we have a really great backyard, so it's not really in our house, I guess, but part of the house. So being able to be in our backyard, we have a park, like a really big park that we overlook. And so just being able to see the trees and be outside is really nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've had several guests talk about their outdoor nature as being their favorite like room because they can kind of expand their space in that. And just what I've found is that we are co-creative with our environments and how they impact us in ways that we don't even necessarily realize. I mean, you can walk past a room and there's some rooms I've found, especially with some of my clients, that they don't go in those rooms. Like there's something about that room that it takes their energy away. And sometimes that ends up being their office, right? So a place that they want to have expansive energy in is actually really contractive. So I just love to see the spaces that people choose that actually inspire them and really give them great ideas or that they feel good in as well. So just that intentionality that we have in being with the people that we want to be with and doing the things that we want to do. So I love I'm such a big proponent of sharing your story and the lessons that we personally learn and the things that people can take away from themselves. So I love that you're all about story and people utilizing their story, not only as part of their healing, but also to be part of their gift that they give out in the world. So I know that people are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they do that?
Yeah, the best way would be to go to my website. It's joiecheng.com, joiecheng.com, and you can find out more about me there and you can contact me there.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your courage and sharing your story and being here with us today.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks again for having me.
You got it. And to our listeners, I just want to thank you so much for being here with us. You bringing your energy here, you listening, getting the words out and sharing is such an important aspect of getting positive messages out in the world. So please, if you've not already, subscribe and share, get it out. Who's that woman in your life that needs to hear this message? And put in some of the comments, what would you like to hear more of or less of? Or, if you've got questions, make sure that you tag both Joy and myself, and we'd be happy to answer them and to support you in any way that we can. So until we connect again, live your spotlight. Bye for now.